Good evening, adventurers. In tonight's tale, we'll be looking at a rather peculiar story in which one player brings a self-insert baby fetish character into a gritty, serious campaign. And then everything kicks off when they're asked to tone it down, and they entirely torpedo their friendship with everybody in the game. Obviously a warning for some kink mention, but nothing goes into too much detail. Let's get into it. Tonight's tale is called Maybe the Real BBEG Was the Friend We Met Along the Way. Our friend and Dungeon Master sets up a text-based 5th edition campaign for us on Discord. We're playing a homebrew campaign with a serious, gritty tone. All of us create our characters accordingly, with the exception of one. Here's our party. Names, of course, changed. Dungeon Master. Ezra, me, the High Elf Trickster Cleric. Tom, the High Elf Death Cleric. Blaze, the Tiefling Wizard. Jenny, the Dragonborn Druid. Limmy, the Servitor Druid Ranger. Drew, the Orc Barbarian. Zach, the Human Sorcerer. Weaver, the Warforged Barbarian. And Carl, Tiefling Bard, and the arsehole in this story. Now, I want to preface this. We're all adults here. We've all been friends, or at least friendly with each other for years. We're all kink positive. No one cares what you like. We don't shame people. The problem comes along when Carl starts to play. You see, Carl's kink is being a baby. He's balls deep in this fantasy. Diapers, baby powder, bottles, pacifiers, breastfeeding, you name it, he's there. We all know this by virtue of knowing Carl for a few years. Weirdly, he treats his kink like a huge, shameful secret that would ruin his life if it got out. But he has no problem with making references to it and play acting it all the time. But regardless, this wasn't a problem for any of us, until he tried to get us to participate in it without our consent. Carl rolls up the most aggressively naive, lawful stupid, I'm baby character he can possibly muster. His character looks like a tiefling who hails from the realm of Candyland. Picture strawberry shortcake with horns standing next to a bunch of hardened ex-cons, and you have our party. Everyone, including the Dungeon Master, is trying their best to make this work, because we're all friends and we just want to play some D&D. Enter the kink roleplay. In Carl's very first post as his character, he rolls up to the barmaid at the starting tavern and asks her for some milk, saying that he just finished drinking his bottle on the way into town. Cue a collective what the f from the rest of us. But we do our best to roleplay around him. His character is the most bubbly, squeaky, giggly, aggressively positive person in all of the Forgotten Realms. He invades my character's personal space on multiple occasions and effectively forces her into the corner of any room they're in because she's so preoccupied with trying to get away from him. My character carries a deck of marked cards and uses them to make money. She plays a few hands with members of the party, wins some gold, makes a few friends. Carl gets jealous. No one is interacting with his posts because they make everyone uncomfortable. He thinks if he acts like my character, he might get some interaction, so he demands that the DM gives his character a deck of cards too. The DM, who is a nice person, trying to keep everyone happy and invested in the campaign, acquiesces. Carl pops back into RP with a clumsy deck of cards he's apparently made with paper and crayons, and tries to make the party play Go Fish with him. This is met with about as much enthusiasm as you would expect. We push forward and meet our benefactor, and enjoy some good RP and character development over dinner, and then a soak in an elaborate bathhouse, notably improved by virtue of Carl saying his character was too baby to take a bath with everyone, and exiting the roleplay immediately. Afterward, we go back to the tavern, shop around town for supplies, and start making plans to retrieve the MacGuffin we've been hired to steal. We're trying to keep things serious, going over the map and determining marching order for our journey to the next town. In the middle of this, Carl returns from the market hauling literally 60 cream pies he bought from a crass halfling baker and about 40 pounds of assorted fruit everyone told him not to buy. He then pulls out a kazoo and starts loudly playing. Around this time, Weaver leaves the party, publicly citing time crunch, but really because Carl is making her so uncomfortable. We're all very saddened by the loss because Weaver was a great character and we really enjoyed RPing with them. This is the point where I throw up my hands, mute the chat and walk away. I've been trying very hard not to ruin anyone else's good time, but Carl is being so aggressively stupid and infantile it's ruining the entire campaign. There's no good way to roleplay with him in character, because if any of our characters met him on the street, they would have been more likely to rob him and leave him for dead. He adds nothing to the story, and he doesn't seem interested in anything besides playing pretend baby. The Dungeon Master gets fed up and approaches Carl privately, asking him to tone down the baby shtick and to try and work with the tone of the campaign a little. She isn't even asking for big changes, just some minor tweaks to keep things running smoothly and preserve the rest of the party's comfort. Carl doesn't like that. Carl freaks out and refuses to change anything, saying, "This is literally who I am inside. You can't ask me to change myself." The Dungeon Master says, "Okay, if you don't want to change your character, how about I help you make a new one?" Carl doesn't like that either. He rejects every suggestion or offer of help and finally decides to pull his character out of the campaign. When he makes this decision, he also demands that his character be removed from the campaign by having the other players trick him into going into the market and then stealing his stuff and leaving town without him. All of us are uncomfortable with that, and we tell him so. The Dungeon Master very smoothly puts Carl on a bus in a much nicer way than he deserves, and we continue to play. The entire debacle prompts some of us to go through our private message history with Carl. We start comparing notes and we discover that he's been unpleasant about almost all of us behind our backs for years. When one of us is succeeding without his help, he hates it because he wants to be depended on. Hindsight is 2020, and on the reread the manipulation and gaslighting really start jumping off the page. I go back about 3 years in my message history and find a long forgotten conversation of Carl telling me he's in love with the Dungeon Master and wants to serve her like a loyal knight, which opens up another whole can of worms. We compare notes further and discover some nastier stuff. Carl has been RPing his kink with almost everyone in our other Discord servers without their knowledge or consent, including minors. I'm a nurse in real life and work with medically fragile infants. Carl would regularly ask me about work in a way that was plausibly friendly, but looking back at it, it became painfully apparent that he wanted to hear about baby stuff to feed his kink. I was and am disgusted by this. There's more, but it's not worth going into here. You get the gist. At this point, we all decide we've had enough. Carl, who had stayed in the game server as a spectator, gets kicked. We cut ties with him and kick and or ban him from all of our personal and emoji servers. He changes his status to "I still love you," but thankfully never makes a stink about it publicly. We ended up going back through the campaign as a group and editing our post to remove all reference to Carl and his character. The story is flowing nicely now with a party who are actually invested in the setting and plot, and we're having a great time. Unfortunately, to this day, I don't think Carl understands what he did wrong. And there we have it. Well, I'm not one to kink shame. What you do or enjoy is your own business, and as long as it doesn't hurt anyone else, then who am I to judge? But attempting to force your kink into a situation where there are other people around who haven't been given the chance to consent and don't consent is absolutely and entirely unacceptable. It seems like this Carl person was a pretty horrible human being anyway, and someone who wants you to rely on them and gets upset at your successes is a toxic person, and the whole group cutting contact with them seemed like it was for the best for all of them. I hope their campaign continues to go well and their lives are better without. Have you ever played in a game where someone has tried to bring a kink without asking for anyone's consent? What happened? Let me know in the comments. Also, if you enjoyed the video, please take a second to like and subscribe as it helps me out quite a lot. Anyway, that's all I have for this evening. Good night.